Hi, everybody. It's John Corelli, your average guy with his average guy opinions. Welcome to episode 29, part 3 of 4, where I am reading the Communist Manifesto. Now, the manifesto is divided into 4 parts, but part 1, which is the bourgeois versus the proletariat, is basically takes up half the document. And so I divided that into the first 2 parts of this. Part 3 is communists and proletariats. And basically, this is the part of this takes up about the third quarter of the document, and it talks about communists being equal with proletariats and basically taking up their cause. And it's really, like I said earlier with Marx, this is an amazing dissection and how do I put it, like a review of society. And to reiterate, this was written in 1848, and he already saw many things as far as means of production. Um, uh, he talks a lot about property in this part of the communists and proletarians part of the document of the Communist Manifesto. So he talks about the bourgeois owning all the property, and therefore, since they control the property, they also control the means of production, and they therefore control a great many other things, which is really a cool uh, breakdown of what he talks about in this section. He speaks of religion being on the side of the bourgeois, and it is. He speaks about the armies and the military being on the sides of the bourgeois and protecting that property from the proletariat. It's true, and we see it today. We see it with BLM versus the DC riots. We see property being protected from certain people, but not from other people. And so it's very interesting. And then obviously racial and cultural um, types of issues come into this as well. He talks about the bourgeois appropriating culture, not only within their own cultures, but appropriating cultures from all across the planet. This is actually something that's come up recently as well. Um, my son got me onto this through Twitter, and there are people in former colonized countries throughout the planet, Asia, Africa especially, that want their cultural items back because they're sitting in museums in London and Paris and other places throughout Europe and in the United States too. They were basically stolen. We act like this is a valuable thing because they're in museums, and museums have had their value, but do they really, is it that necessary anymore? I mean, I love going to an art museum and seeing stuff, but generally art was, either bought by the museum, so they paid a price for the art, or it was donated by an amazingly famous artist, or an artist who wanted the exposure. That's generally how museums work. Not history museums, which is kind of hard for me as a history guy. It's that stuff is all thefted, it's stolen, and it's put on display. Yeah, it's a great thing to learn about these cultures, but that's a sad way to have to learn about these cultures. I mean, you look at this stuff, even you go to the natural, well, now it's called the Museum of Nature and Science. It used to be called the Natural History Museum. But you go, and I now I have a completely new way of thinking about this because of the Communist Manifesto. I look at a totem pole and it's amazing. It's like a 30-foot totem pole. It's right in the Native American exhibit in the Museum of Nature and Science, and that was taken. That was most likely not donated by, I don't know, the tribes of the Northwest, but it was not given, most likely. It was taken by the white man. Some rich guy probably owned it in his backyard or somewhere for a while, and then, I'm super rich, and I'll donate this to the museum, and I'll have a little plaque with my name at the bottom of it, so I look like a good guy. Holy shit! I mean, it really is. This is quite an awakening for me. I never really thought about this stuff and how it got there, and so there is a movement by the descendants of the peoples that lost these things, that had them stolen from them, to get them back. I think it's a completely legitimate movement. And considering the way the first world works now, yeah, who doesn't want to go to a museum? Well, actually, a lot of people, but I love going to museums. I love seeing all that stuff. But in this first world, and when we have everything at our fingertips that can be seen instantly, yeah, we should give this stuff back. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Maybe turn the museums of natural history and stuff like that, turn them back into art museums, and how do I want to say, incentivize artists to create new works that could fill those old buildings, or turn them into schools. Turn them into schools where we learn about history through a computer, and maybe zooming people on the other side of the planet and talking to them and saying, "Hey, what's your culture like, and how is being a former colony, oftentimes up until as recently as the 1960s, especially in Africa, how has that impacted your life?" I mean, I know a lot of the kids I work with that were born in Africa, or their parents were born in Africa. Even the special needs kids can speak often three, four, five languages. They speak English. They often speak French if they were from a French colony, and then they probably speak their native language, like Bambara or Swahili, or I don't know how many, but I think there are like 400 languages in Africa, maybe more, but the tribal languages are still used. So, what else did Marx talk about? This is interesting too. Marx talked about the family as capital. And this is especially valid considering it was in 1848, and that children were freely used as labor. I mean, the anti-child labor movement was still a good 60, 70, 80 years away until like the 20s, the 1920s. So he spoke about that. He spoke about, I mean, he was really, there's some things that he says that it's just like, wow, this guy was writing about the same time as Mark Twain, I believe, and just as eloquently and completely nonfiction. He talked about the family as, like I said, as capital, but he also talked about, how did he put it? He talked about the plight of the woman. I mean, say what you want about communism if you don't know about it, or at least the theory of communism. And I'm going to say this here too. Any ism is only as good as the human beings that are working that system, right? I mean, I often say that I get on the highway and people are idiots out there. I said, this is a perfectly good system. It's designed well. You pass on the left, you use your turn signal, you know how to merge with traffic, you go with the flow of traffic. But unfortunately, that system and its rules are only as good as the humans who employ it. And it's the same with anything. Communism, we got Stalin, no good. Socialism, we had Hitler, that didn't work. Capitalism, we had Trump. There's a shithead that has led every system, and several. And I'm not just dumping on Trump because it's the cool thing to do now. There have been many guys at the heads of state that acted like psychopaths. But yeah, so to go back to the woman and the family, well, what Marx was basically saying was that women in this system in 1848, in this bourgeois capitalistic system that's developing, he says they are prostitutes. Whether they're legal prostitutes or illegal prostitutes only depends on generally if they're bourgeois or proletariat, or if they're in a family. I mean, obviously, proletariats had a family unit just like the bourgeois did. But the women were there to make more babies to support the system on both ends and all classes. He spoke a lot about class conflict, and how that when you focus on class conflict, like it's almost like the keeping up with the Joneses, that the bourgeois said, hey, you work hard and you'll get here, which is a lie generally. You work hard and you'll get here, and just like we hear people saying today, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's generally bullshit. Like, you didn't work hard to get there. You inherited. You had property, whether it was a feudal lord from a couple hundred years ago, or whether your great 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 grandfather was a high priest. Whatever it was, you walked into your wealth, and as a member of that upper class, that bourgeois, you're running a con on the proletariat, and unfortunately, a lot of the proletariat buys. Oh yeah, if I work hard, I can get to where that guy was. Not likely. He also even spoke about minimum wage. I'll get this in quickly before 10 minutes ends, but he spoke about minimum wage and said it's aptly named because, yeah, you're giving the guy the minimum, so he works his ass off for you based on that lie that I told a minute ago, that you can get anywhere if you work hard. and you pay him as little as you can to get as much as you can out of him. So your stock rises, and his life doesn't get any better. He's getting by on scraps. That's therefore called the minimum wage. All right, you guys. I know it's a lot. Been a lot for me to read. I have to read these things twice because it's deep reading. It's good, but you should read it just to see. Even if obviously most people in this country don't believe or agree with communism, it's an interesting read, and it's something that I think you should give a shot. And just it's a good brain bender, man. All right, we'll see you guys next time. That has been episode 29. I'll see you in episode 30 with part 4 of the Communist Manifesto. Thank you for listening. Talk to you soon. Bye.